So I want to thank you all so much for being here this evening. I am helping with this series as much as possible, but really this is mostly in the hands of Katelyn Yarbrough and Michelle Treece, who are part of our They're both on our advisory committee and on our diversity and inclusion committee here at the McKinney Center. And so we also ask for your patience a little bit this evening, since we're doing this for the first time, and we hope to have some good conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and switch over to Katelyn and let her introduce our guest of the evening. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Katelyn Yarbrough, and I will be your moderator this evening for Conversations That Matter. And we've got actually two of my favorite people here this evening to have a conversation, and we get to witness it and be a part of it. After I do this little intro, I'm just going to be here behind the screen in front of them, making sure that we keep the ball rolling. You will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So if you do have a question, please type it in the chat. And realistically, we probably won't be able to get to all of them, but we will do our best to answer your questions. But let's see. This evening we are going to be having a conversation with Terry Countermine, one of Jonesborough's aldermen, and also with Michelle Treece, who was actually my high school biology teacher, and probably is part of the reason of why I am the way that I am today. But like I said, some wonderful people, some of my favorites. So let me get this camera switched here, and I'll let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about themselves. Hang on one moment. All right. Michelle Treece, tell us about yourself.
Hey there, it's great to be here. Michelle Treece. I'm a retired teacher from Johnson City Schools, and yes, Katelyn was one of my students, and it is such a pleasure to see her do what she is doing. So very, very proud. Retired maybe 4 years ago. I am on the Johnson City School Board. I'm on the McKinney Center Board here at the Advisory Board, International Storytelling Board, several other boards across the Washington County and Johnson City. Very involved in the community and happy to be doing that. My goodness, what else? A lot of the committees I'm on are dealing with social justice, diversity and equity and that type thing. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to have this conversation. Hopefully nothing has been, it's not a play. We haven't memorized our lines. We're just having a conversation. So I'm very excited to do this.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, and Terry Countermine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Terry Countermine, an alderman here in Jonesborough. I've lived here for 30 years, longer than I've lived anywhere else. I call it home, and I'm glad I call it home. I love Jonesborough. I actually was born in New York State, up near Albany, in a little small rural town of population 800, Tribes Hill, New York. And I think that had a lot to do with my development and culture and where I am now. I taught here at East Tennessee for 30 years. Was chair of the computer science department for 20, and am very committed and feel the importance of education in so much of what we do, including what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is how to confront racism and make things better in the world and in our country and in Jonesborough for everybody. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm hoping that Michelle and I get to know each other better, because we've known each other now since last Christmas time. And I'm looking forward to knowing more about her, and hopefully her more about me. And I'm very pleased that you asked me to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. So these questions that, let me preface this with, this is supposed to be an organic conversation, like Michelle said. So there is no script. I have some questions here just in case if things, you know, if we just focus on one topic a little too much, I'll get us back on the rails here. But let's start with one of the questions. We'll start in the beginning. When you were growing up as a child, what did your parents or guardians say to you about Black folks? We'll switch this camera back.
Well, I was Black. Still am. So I guess mine would be about white folks.
Good.
You know, I think back, I went to a kindergarten that was born in 1960. So my first 5 years of life, when I started attending school in kindergarten, my teacher was a Black woman, and the school was at her house, Miss Clark. Still remember her. And we just went to school, you know, and we learned all the things we were supposed to do. All the kids in the class were Black kids. And then I started first grade, and honestly, I do not recall any conversations about, okay, and this was with desegregation. So first grade, 65, 66, integration was happening. And I don't recall any conversations from my mom saying, or my dad saying, okay, there are going to be white kids there, so be ready. I don't recall any of that. I do know that as a kid growing up, my mom was a domestic, and she worked house cleaning, babysitting, cooking, all that with a white family. And so I would go over, I was the oldest, I have 2 younger brothers. I would go with her to their house. And I remember playing with Kathy, and there's another son, I can't think of the name, but Kathy and Penny. And there were little white kids, and we sold lemonade in the front yard. But I do not recall any questions of concern about white folks. So very interesting. And the only thing I can remember in the first grade, my mom came to pick me up at school when she was walking me back out to the car. And and I do not remember this, so this is a story from my mom. A little girl said to her, a white girl, to her white mom, "Mom, look, that girl is dirty." And her mom was just like devastated. And she just kind of said, shh, and pulled her, you know, on. But I don't recall that. But talking as I got older with my mom, she goes, "Oh yeah, this is a story."
Wow.
And that's the only story that I remember. So again, I don't recall having those negative experience or anything like that with white folks.
That's pretty much the same with me, but for a different reason, and that's because in my school, which is a small rural school, my graduating class was 40, so that's the size of and pretty much like that growing through kindergarten on up. And I can only remember one Black family in the area, and I was older than their oldest, so I didn't see much. The only thing how I got to know them a little bit is I was raised with my grandmother and aunt and uncle and my mom, my 2 cousins, and my 3 siblings. So there was 10 of us in a 4-room house with an attic. So it was, but as I often said, we were poor, but we didn't know it because there was a lot of love, and especially my dear grandmother and aunt and mother, they never said anything. They were very kind people, I guess, which was wonderful. I didn't appreciate it until I got older. But my aunt, who taught Sunday school at the church we went to, invited one of the Black children to Sunday school, and she came. And so I got to know that family, was the Williams family. But that's the only recollection I have through high school of having any interaction with any people of color.
Were there Black folks in your school, or that was the
No.
only family?
Yeah, it was very rural and farmers, a lot of farmers, and mostly we were very homogeneous. You know, I don't know what the average income was, but it wasn't very much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mom, after my father, which I don't remember because I was a little over 3 when he left, she worked to support 4 kids. And I can remember when she retired, she told me she was making $6.25 an hour. I can't imagine how she did it.
My folks divorced when I was 7. And so the neighborhood we lived in the first, which is when I went to school, first grade, I do not recall if I was the only black kid in that class, but it was a white school. And my parents divorced between my first and second grade. All right. And then we moved. And then we moved into a housing project in Morristown. And then I ended up going to another school, my second grade, I think. That was, again, it was a predominantly white school. But we were poor too. We grew up in the projects, and I've always gone to school with white kids. Church, I recall, it was a black church. My cousins lived in a black neighborhood, and the school that they went to was like the black school at the time. And so when segregation happened, they just continued going there. But I don't recall, ever being the only black kid at a school, or being in a school of all black kids, and then maybe, 1 or 2 white folks. Never had that moment. In classes, I was the only black kid in a lot of my classes. I took some of the honors classes and that, but not enough to, cause a problem. Just don't recall that.
Yeah. I remember when I went to college, and I also went to a small college near Erie, Pennsylvania. Believe it or not, I went on a basketball scholarship, which I don't know that I'd be able to do that today, but back then 5'10" wasn't that short. But it was a school run by the Polish National Alliance. I was only one of 2 students that wasn't of Polish descent, and the same 2 were the only Protestants.
No black kids there either, right?
Well, I had one black friend there, but he was a townie, not going to the college. And he'd come to the gym when we'd play basketball sometime. I got to know him because we played basketball together. But again, the only thing maybe comparable to racism is I never, because we were all white, even though I was the only Protestant, and back then it was kind of a thing. When I was little, Protestants and Catholics, if they got married, it was a big deal. Same with Jewish and any rate. But the difference was that we were all white.
Yeah.
So there wasn't, like, if you walked into a room, you wouldn't say, well, I know you're Polish, or I know you're a Mongol, or whatever I am, And so I wasn't ever confronted with what I felt was unfair treatment. And therefore I also didn't have to deal with it because I wasn't around. It wasn't until I then went to Penn State, and I went from a college of about 1,000 to a college of over 40,000. And whoa.
Right.
And there I saw a lot of diversity. But I concentrated so much on studying because I was worried that I was the dumbest kid there, because I didn't have a lot of confidence. And here I was, someone who had grown up in a small town and a small college, and then now I'm at a big, and so again, I didn't pay a lot of attention there. The only real contact I had, I lived in a dorm, and one of my friends, William, and I don't remember his last name anymore, and he was from Philadelphia, and he was black, and we got to be good friends, and we studied together. And then when I was singing, because I was also doing some singing to work my way through college, I met someone in the, musicians sort of attract each other, like I hope you and I do sometimes.
Right.
And we sang together sometimes. But it wasn't like we were good friends. It wasn't, I think, until I came here after I went to Auburn. Now, going to Auburn was an eye-opener because all of a sudden, 25% of the population were black. And again, there wasn't much socialization. I can't remember any of my faculty colleagues being black.
Did you ever have any black teachers? Ever? Like throughout?
No. But my wife, bless her heart, was a special ed teacher. And when we moved to Auburn, lo and behold, every student in her class was black, which was an eye-opener for her. And she said, you know, the statistics are such that that shouldn't be. Where are the kids that are white? And it turns out a lot of the people didn't want to send their kids to that class because they were black. But I'm very thankful for that because because of my love of basketball, I got involved with coaching. Sandy is very involved with Special Olympics. And so I volunteered to coach the kids, and they were all black. I'd drive over to what was the projects there with my truck and pick them up and go to a gym practice. And we became friends. It took them a while to trust me. And I remember this was the first experience I really had driving into the projects to pick them up. There were people watching me. What's he doing here?
This white man got our kids.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
Yeah. And they had to gain my trust too because I was taking their kids. You know, the kids were jumping. Back then you could ride in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And they'd fight over who was going to ride up front. You know, two of them could ride up front. And one of the things I learned there that was very interesting was when I would take them home and they would tell me where they were going, they didn't talk about where they lived. They said where they stayed. Peanut's staying over here tonight. And I found that interesting. And it wasn't until later when I actually talked to someone who became a friend that in the project that sometimes it's common because they didn't always live in the same place. Stayed with their grandmother or their aunt or, you know. But it was very good for me, and I loved those kids, you know, and we had a good time, and every Sunday night I'd pick them up and we'd go play basketball. But that was the first experience I had in Auburn with predominantly black. But again, the culture, and this is what I hope we can change and that I can change is, I think in my life, and I've got now I was making a list last night when I was thinking, maybe 16, 18 people who I would consider friends. Now there's different levels of friendship. You know, like I consider you a friend and you a friend. And the more you get to know people, the more better friends. But since Auburn to now, I've only ever been in one black person's house, and that was Keith Johnson, Keith and Shirley.
Wow. And
I've only had a few in our home, which I'm hoping that changes. And bocce, the bocce tournament, we have the annual Washington County Library benefit bocce tournament. I've got Katelyn, of course I know her from other places too, but I got to know Rufus and Robin Houston, who are wonderful people. And they come every year, and he's very active in supporting the library. And but I ask myself, why is it? It's that cultural thing that I'm really committed in working towards. We've got to have a chance for people to come together like this,
right? Because
that's when you get to know somebody and you feel, well, let's invite so and so over, you know, and if they don't, and I've had lunch many times with Keith, and but I just don't. That bothers me about myself. And when I look at some of the things that I have unintentionally, you know, we were talking earlier about the difference between intentional and unintentional racism. And you know, some people just are nasty.
Yeah.
And then other people, because of the way they were raised and their experiences and growing up, don't even realize that they're racist or that some of their actions are racist. And until we raise the awareness, it's going to be difficult. And I think that's one of the things I hope that this does, is raise awareness of other people's cultures and how we can get together and play together and have fun together and get to know each other better.
What year was that you worked with the young folks in Auburn?
That was from 1979 through 1990. 11 years we were down there.
Wow.
Yeah, we went a lot of places. It was, and they were, well, and here's an example of what I've just learned recently, the concept of systemic and institutional racism, just because I've been reading about it. That's one of those things that I never had to deal with, so I don't really realize, you know, what it is. But, well, part of it was Sandy just having black kids in her class. You know, that
was that.
There's no reason that should be. And like talking with Keith, when we tried in the computer science department to recruit both females and people of color, because it's a good thing to do, but it was hard to do. And when I talked to Keith about that, he's now in charge of diversity at the university, and just recently, and I don't know why it took me so well, why I didn't do it more when I was there, ignorance, you know, and by that I don't mean that I just didn't think about it. When we had to advertise for a new position, you had to check off the boxes for affirmative action, and one of the boxes was, did you advertise in a predominantly black college? And yes, I send email to that and have them posted on the bulletin board. But as Keith said, that's not how you're going to recruit. If you use athletics example for a moment, you've got to build a relationship. You've got to go to conferences. You've got to go meet people so they know you and they trust you. So when the job comes open, they say, well, I think I might want to go there.
Right.
But we don't do that. And then we wonder why we don't get anybody applying for the job.
And one thing that I note about that, and I don't want to say it's an easy fix, but you have to be conscious about it, is when you go out there someplace away from Johnson City and Washington County to recruit a person of color to come into the area, you can't just expect them to come in and land.
Exactly.
Our community has to welcome them in. It's more than just say, come on in, we got a job for you, and, you know, go over there and talk to that guy, that lady, because they can find you a house in the area and be done. This community has to support them when they're here. I told someone the other day, if you hire a new professor at ETSU, or, you know, even with our schools, someone who is out of town, they're not coming in just to do that job. They're coming in as a black person or a person of color to represent other people of color. They need to be welcomed into the community by people of color, and they need to be welcomed into the community by white folks as well. They are not just doing their job, but they represent a successful person in our community who is a person of color. When hiring teachers, if you hire a teacher of color, that teacher isn't just teaching. They are setting an example for every other kid of color, every other parent of color who can say, oh, there's a black teacher for my kid. There's lots more going on than just the job you hired them for.
Yeah.
And I think with white folks, when you get hired, just come in and teach. All you gotta do is teach. Yeah. But I say black folks have more jobs than just what they're hired for.
Yeah.
A lot of eyes are on them. A lot of eyes expect from them, and that's good. That's good, but it's a little more. And so that support system has to be in place, and it's not just, you know, here, find a house to live in.
Yeah, it's got to be intentional.
It's got to be very intentional.
And that's the institutional problems. You've got to somehow provide that.
Right. Right, right. That systemic part is, I think it's even, for me as a Black woman, you know, I know systemic racism is out there, but there's some pieces that I'm like, I didn't realize that. Even me as a Black woman, I didn't even realize that. And it's just from laws, policies that are in place, you know, even from the 50s and Jim Crow and the 60s and all of that. Policies are in place to keep people of color down. And I'm like, wow, even me, my age, I still see things that I didn't realize that.
And that's where I think the education and awareness comes in. Using myself as an example, just in the last 2 months, when I had a light bulb go on, you know, we need to share with our friends stories. You know, here we are in Jonesboro, we ought to be able to tell stories. That, you know, stories, true stories of people and how they were mistreated. Because most people don't realize it. Like I was saying earlier, that I didn't realize what the Trail of Tears was. Now they were people, certainly the Native Americans, and they were driven out of their land. And then you've got, well, a very subtle one, and I think Katelyn and I talked about this a while ago. I can remember, because I love athletics and watching football, and after a game, they a lot of times would interview somebody who'd done very well. And when generally a Black running back or something would be interviewed, I can remember saying to Sandy, boy, he's really articulate. And I meant it as a compliment. Mm-hmm. But what I was really saying is that most Black people aren't. Most Black running backs, you know, because a lot of times you would see them interviewed and their grammar.
Right.
But see, that's not, I won't say it's cool, but it's wrong. You know, to think that, to generalize like that. I think we generalize so much with so many different types of things, whether it's Black or, you know, the LGBTQ community. I mean, it's wrong the way we treat people and we generalize. And one of the things I said the other night at the board meeting is, like right now, it's so sad what's going on. It's like it's an either or. Either you're for the police and against demonstration, or you're for demonstration. And that's not that at all. I mean, we're for both of those things.
Right.
And when you look at the history of our country, we've been demonstrating and protesting since the Boston Tea Party.
I think the slaves were probably protesting on that ship.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, the history of that.
Oh, yeah. That's part of that. It's
and
systemic.
Should protest.
Yes.
That's the,
yes.
You know, people I hear saying, oh, they shouldn't be protesting. Golly, when women's rights, as I said, you would think so many things that we wouldn't have now if there hadn't been protests.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's got to get better.
And I think people have to pause and try to understand the other side.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to accept and tolerate. Just try to at least understand it. So when you do go out and sometimes I don't like the word protest, because sometimes I think it's just, I want you to listen to me. Yeah. I think it's, you know, there's a meme out there, I believe in Facebook, and it's like, we prayed about it and y'all didn't listen. And then we tried to march about it, and then then rioting. I mean, I think people get louder and louder and trying to just get people to hear them. When this is easy.
Yeah.
You know, some of the protests I think lately in the area, we see these folks, both sides, screaming profanity and carrying on and not listening. But then over there in the corner, you've got 5 or 6 people that are sitting down, from both sides, talking about it. And
that's right.
That's the easy part. That's easy. Just sit down and talk.
Yeah.
But people have to want to understand. You can't just step out and say, This is how I feel. I don't care about anybody else. I ain't changing my mind. No, again, I always say you have to, but you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. Let's live in America. But it'd be nice if people would try to understand this is what my cause is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
I've got a question for you guys. Let me flip back. Am I heard? Can you guys hear me okay? That's my note. I'm hoping so. I have to speak louder, so sorry I'm yelling at you guys. This is, I think, a good question. The death of George Floyd has opened the eyes of many folks. What do you both see now that you didn't see before in terms of demonstrations, in terms of eyes being opened and actually acknowledging and being aware of blatant racism? Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I've actually thought about that. I think, and I've shared this with my own friends, that I think the George Floyd incident, murder, it's not even an incident, it's a murder, it's like it actually turned the light on.
Yeah.
And I think people now truly see what has gone on for years. And, you know, we've got this Black Lives Matter part where I think we all, Black folks, brown folks, white folks, everybody, really need to take time and learn history. Go back and look at all of the incidents where, I hate to say it, where white supremacists, and I want to be very clear about that, not all white people feel this way. There are white supremacists and there are white folks, where white supremacists across this nation for many decades have terrorized. And I think George Floyd's murder was right in our face.
Yeah.
And I think that that light showed that we all have a part to play. You know, I think some people are like, there are more cops are being murdered than whatever, and doing the data. We don't have time for data. We have time to stop and figure out what is going on. Go back and look at history and see that it has been going on. Lynchings now. And people want to turn a blind eye to that, and it's not in our community. Well, what if it is? Are you waiting for it to come to this community and then do something? We don't have time for that. I am really excited to see there are lots of white folks marching with the Black Lives Matter group across the nation. And the reason why I say that is Black folks are a minority. So even if we all got together and tried to vote in a policy, there's no way that minority vote is going to ever count as a single minority vote. So if we have white folks and brown folks and all kinds of other folks on board, I think that's a way to make a change. If anything, those protests and those rallies and vigils, you could see the number of people that are standing in support of that. So I hope that we see lots of change, positive, productive change. And it probably is going to get a little uglier than it gets prettier. But hey, I think when the slaves came over on that ship, it was ugly.
Yeah.
And I think we can deal with a little bit of ugly as long as we're making it to the pretty.
Yeah, my answer would be that, again, getting back to awareness, and I blame myself for it. As I was saying earlier, history to me was boring because I just had to memorize dates and people and places, and it wasn't told as a story. So when I've been asked, what were you taught about Black history? And the answer is nothing. I mean, I learned about the Civil War, but that really isn't Black history. And when this happened, it made me, I guess because of my background in education, who I am, it made me think, I need to find out more about this. And I started to read. And when I read the article that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote, and he did the metaphor where he said, look around the room, do you see any dust? And he compared it to racism. And he said, now if the light shines through the window just right, you see it. and it's there. And he said, racism is the same way, but I don't see it every day. People of color see it every day and experience it every day, and it's not all nice. Well, racism, none of it's nice. But it's hard to, as a white person, and I'm guilty of it, you know, you're not looking for it, so you don't see it. And because you're not a person of color, there's no dust. Look, it's wonderful in here. But it isn't. And the people that say that we don't have it here, and some people say, oh, that's in Minneapolis and the bigger cities. It just isn't. I don't know if any of you, there was a Facebook comment. I try to stay away from it because it makes me not feel very good, some of the nastiness on there. But there was a comment about that those of us that didn't grow up here should go back north because you're not like us and you don't feel like us, so get out of here. You know, and that's the problem. Instead of, and I'm not going to get out of here because I love Jonesboro and I'm hoping, and I love our country. I'm glad you know, we're not always proud of everything that happens, but there's no utopia wherever you go. And so I've always said that one of the things that I try to and hope to continue to do is make this little corner of the world where I live a little better. And I got to learn how to do that better because I haven't done what I should have done. And I'm speaking as a white male. Something said to me the other day that I hadn't ever thought about. And they said, and it was Ron Carson. His mom, he went to visit her. She's 87, I think he said. And she said that, and I guess she's got a granddaughter who is black, who's marrying a white man. And she says, I'm not really pleased with this. She said this to Ron. She said, I'm a racist. And he said, no, Mom, you're not a racist. You're prejudiced. There's a difference. And my ears perked up when he said this because I had never heard this before. Because with racism comes, to be racist and to experience racism, there has to be a power. And in our country, most of the power, as you were saying, belongs to the white, and mostly white males. And most of us white males don't like to hear you say that because, oh, I'm not like that. But if you examine yourself, you know, if you have the power, then you can really be a racist because you keep people down. You don't hire the people you should hire. We're all prejudiced too. None of us can say we're not about different things, you know, whether it's religion or race or so many things. But I had never thought of it that way, that prejudice is different than being racist. And then, again, another light bulb. The light bulbs have been going on in my mind quite a bit lately as I learn more. But that's the awareness that I'm hoping somehow we can come to.
And I think it's having a conversation, in that conversation alone, you learn that difference between prejudice and racism. And are racist. And unless you're put in a place to question that or ask or even think about it, you never will.
That's right.
You know, you never will. Prejudice, I always look at it as it's prejudging. So, you know, do I get nervous when I see a cop riding behind me? Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have any reason? Nope. I've got a seatbelt on. I'm not speeding. I'm good. But I still will prejudge that cop, even though they've never said a word to me. I know it's a cop. Yeah. And we all do that. I think we move through life. There's a classic face of a white man that makes me so nervous, and I won't describe it because it might be some of y'all. but when I see that face. If anybody that knows me, I will talk to a rock. I will say hello to everybody. But when I see that particular face come, my whole body shifts. And I may not speak and may question Michelle Martin saying hello because he's just a person, but I may not speak to that person. I had a wonderful story about being prejudiced and a racist individual. And this guy was not racist, but he checked all my boxes. That's what you got. You're looking like that. That's what you're wearing. All the boxes were checked, and I thought racist, right? And so I'm in the store, and I see him, and I'm like, okay, not speaking, not making eye contact. And I go down the aisle, and you can just feel somebody behind you. It makes me crazy. I'm sure I'll cry. So I feel this person behind me, and I think, wow. Tell the story. I'm good. So I feel him behind me, and y'all know I'm strong. I'm good.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty strong. So I claim my space, and I do that classic. I'm stepping back one step, just in case, and I did that. And I was right. He was right there, and he said, "Oh, excuse me." And I turned. It was this guy, and I didn't say anything. I just turned and looked at him. He said, "I was just admiring your hair." So that took me for a complete loop because I knew you were going to call me the N-word, and I knew you were whatever. And I said, "Oh," he says, "your hair is beautiful." And I said, "Well, thank you." And one of those classic examples is this big bushy beard thing. And he had checkbox number 1, the big bushy beard. And we had, Michael, I will never forget you. We had one of the best conversations about hair. He's got this wild beard, and he said, always ask, he said, "Can I touch your hair?" And I said, in my head, "Mr. Racist Man, you want to touch my hair? I'm going to let you touch my hair." And I said, "Yeah." And he reached down and he touched my hair, and I said, "Now, you know what I'm going to ask you?" And he said, "No, what?" And I said, "Can I touch your beard?" So I touched this guy's beard, and just a little bit, and we talked, and I said, "You should put a dreadlock in that, because that's great." And 15-minute conversation with Michael. And I walked away going, how many people that had that characteristic, that classic look, have I walked by? And it could have been Michael. So, we have it, we do it, and we miss out. If I had walked away from him and never said a word to him, I would have missed that whole conversation. It's not about hair. It's about having this conversation with this man who I would never have talked to, ever. Would I pause and spent that much time talking to this man? So, you step out. My motto: you step up and step out, and good things happen. Thanks, Michael. Hope you're watching.
That was awesome. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that story. Okay, something that you brought up, Terry, just about representation and the majority of white patriarchy, white men in power. This is a question that I wrote. What do you believe would be a good place to start, since so many people are freshly born into this awareness? That's what I've been calling it. Freshly born. Welcome. We've been waiting for you.
Have a seat at the table.
Yes.
Amen.
And the mask is slipping, and so people are witnessing this now. So what do you believe where is a good place to start besides these conversations, because these are conversations that matter? Meeting Michael, that is a really good start. I have the same checklist, and I get quiet. But that I want to work on that. But where do you think we can also jump in and be anti-racist and work toward that equity? And the difference between equality and equity is if you're down here and I'm up here and we both need to reach here, if we are given equal things, the person down here is still not going to get there. So, we need equity. But what in your opinions, both of you, are something that we can do with the platforms we have, with these conversations? What else can we do?
Well, again, I think I've been using the term a lot, awareness. I just was listening to NPR today, and they interviewed a couple of black men that were black men. Now we got to work on the women too, but who were CEOs of very successful companies. And the awareness across the board that that's possible. One of the examples that I use with that is when I was younger, you didn't see any black quarterbacks because they weren't smart enough. They could run and they could carry the ball and they could catch it, but don't put them there where they got to make quick decisions and that. And then Doug Williams from Grambling, of all places, with the Washington Redskins, and in the Super Bowl, and he threw for like over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns in the second quarter, and it changed. That one experience changed. Now it's still taken longer, but now, and I use that because again, I come back to examples are important to me. That's how I learn. If we can, through awareness, show people who have been given the chance and succeeded, then we'll give more people a chance. Now, how do you get rid of voting is important. And I'm guilty of this. I've been calling to see who to vote for. I'll use this as an example for school board, because very honestly, that's very important, school board. But I haven't done my homework. I'm supposed to vote for 3 people, and I don't know who to vote for. And I need to get educated. It's the same way with anybody that's running for office that is going to have some power. You need to know who they are and who they stand for and what they stand for. And differences of opinion are good. I've always said that sometimes changing your mind is okay. A lot of times they make a big thing in the politics about, he said this in 1983. That's crazy. I did some things in high school that I'm glad you don't know about or anybody else. It wasn't racist, but it wasn't something that I'd be advertising. And so just learning who people are and what they stand for, and listening. We don't do enough listening, because we can change our mind if we listen. And I'm guilty of that too. A lot of times when somebody else is talking, you're not really listening. You're thinking, what am I going to say when they're done? Right?
It's exactly.
And we all do it. And we should listen more. And now, especially with the phones during meetings, you see people, until that person's talking, and then they might start talking. They haven't listened at all or learned anything. It's just, my opinion is that they ought to outlaw iPhones during meetings. I don't think that'll happen, but I'm serious, because why are you at the meeting if you're not going to pay attention and listen to other people? And that listening and learning is what I think is important, and what you're talking about, Katelyn, with getting more people in positions where they have some power. I don't really like that word, but that's really what it is. Some authority, some influence. I think that's a better word. So influence to get more people that generally aren't given the chance to do it. Does that make sense?
It does. I think my thing, I would like to see people who have that authority, power, influence to, just look at where they use that power and influence, and just check to see, do I have people of color here? I look at commercials on TV. Some of you guys that really know me know I do this. There's a certain magazine in Johnson City that I go through. I don't even read the magazine. I just go through and start looking how many black people are in this. It's a local magazine, and I'll count the faces. And I think a lot of businesses in Johnson City, and I say Washington County in general, I think if you are in a place to hire, move people around in your establishment, when you set up your advertisement on the commercials, you need some people of color. Because I'm kind of like this, if I don't see me, then I can't go in there.